I never imagined it would end like this. My love story, with Olive, it was supposed to be the kind of love that lasts forever. It started like any other, two people meeting, falling in love, building a future together. At first, it felt like everything was perfect. She made me feel special, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I thought I'd found someone who would always be there. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Then came the accident. I remember it so clearly. One minute, I was walking down the street, living my life, and the next, everything went black. The doctors said I would never see again. I was blind. And just like that, my world was turned upside down. Olive promised me she'd be there. She told me that no matter what happened, we'd get through it together. I trusted her. I believed every word she said. She was my rock. But what I didn't realize was how much control she was taking, how much she was changing things, right under my nose. I thought I could trust her. I thought I knew her. But the more I needed her, the more I depended on her, the more she took. She wasn't just helping me. She was taking control of my life, everything I knew about it. And it didn't stop there. It wasn't until I saw something that I realized what was really happening. I wasn't just losing my sight, I was losing her, too. And when I found out what she had been hiding, well, that's when everything changed. You won't believe what I uncovered. It was like a punch to the gut. The truth was there, all along, right in front of me. And once I saw it, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Subscribe now, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. It all started so perfectly. I was 28, living a life I was proud of. I had a steady job, a small circle of close friends, and I was content with my life. I wasn't looking for anything else, especially not love. But then, one night, everything changed. That's when I met Olive. She wasn't what I was expecting. I had met plenty of women before, but there was something different about Olive. It wasn't just the way she looked, though she was beautiful. It was the way she made me feel. She had this way of making everything seem brighter. When she looked at me, it felt like she could see something in me that no one else could. She saw me for me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but she was about to become the center of my world. We met at a mutual friend's party. I remember her standing across the room, laughing with a group of people. She wasn't the loudest person in the room, but there was something magnetic about her presence. She was calm but confident. Her eyes locked with mine across the room, and for a moment, I felt like the world stood still. I didn't even know why, but I had to go talk to her. It was one of those conversations that felt like we had known each other forever. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. It felt easy, like we were two pieces of a puzzle, fitting perfectly together. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so comfortable with someone. That night, I remember thinking to myself, this is it. She's the one. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. Olive and I spent nearly every day together. We'd grab coffee, go for walks, or just talk for hours. The connection between us was undeniable. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I thought we had something special. I mean, how could I not? Every moment with her felt so effortless, like we were meant to be. But looking back now, I realize I was blinded by the excitement of it all. In the beginning, everything felt perfect. She was supportive, caring, and always there for me. But when things seem too good to be true, they usually are, right? At first, I didn't see the signs. Little things, at first. Like how she always seemed to know exactly what I needed before I did. It was like she could read my mind. But the more I relied on her, the more she started to control the decisions I made. It wasn't in an obvious way, though. Olive never outright told me what to do. She just suggested things, in the way that made it hard to say no. You know how it is when you first fall for someone, right? You want to believe the best in them. You ignore the red flags because, well, you don't want to see them. I guess I was so wrapped up in the idea of her being perfect, that I didn't notice how much I was losing myself in the process. Looking back now, I realize I let her shape my world without even noticing. She knew what buttons to push. She knew exactly when to comfort me and when to make me doubt myself. She would always say things like, "You're lucky I'm here for you," or, "You wouldn't be able to handle things without me." And I believed her. I thought it was just her way of showing care. I thought she was just being protective, looking out for me. But those words were never as innocent as they seemed. At the time, I didn't see it for what it was. I thought I was the one being helped, that she was making my life easier. But slowly, I became more dependent on her. And that's when everything started to shift. I remember the first time she made a decision for me without asking me. It was something small at first, choosing where we would go for dinner, what movie we should watch. I thought, no big deal. It's just her being thoughtful. But over time, it wasn't just small things. It was the bigger decisions, too. She started making choices about where we lived, how we spent our weekends, who I should spend time with. It wasn't just suggestions anymore. It felt like I had lost control. I tried to ignore it. I told myself that I was just overthinking things, that she had my best interests at heart. But deep down, I knew something was off. I didn't know what it was, but I felt it in my gut. And then, when I couldn't see anymore, when my world went dark, that's when everything changed. Olive promised me that she'd be there. She told me she would take care of me, that nothing would change. But as I began to rely on her more and more, I noticed something unsettling. She was always around, always helping, always doing things for me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't doing it out of love. It was more like she was managing me. Watching me. Taking control of everything I couldn't do anymore. At first, I thought it was just her being supportive. But as time went on, I began to feel suffocated. It was like my independence was slowly being stripped away. And the more I resisted, the more she pushed. I started losing myself. I couldn't remember the last time I made a decision for myself. And then the accident happened. That was when everything flipped. I went from being the one in control of my life to being completely dependent on her. What I didn't realize then was that this wasn't just about the accident. It wasn't just about me losing my sight. It was about her gaining power, about her gaining control over me in a way I couldn't even understand yet. Looking back now, I see all the signs I missed. But it wasn't until I couldn't see anymore, until I had no other choice but to rely on her completely, that I started to understand the true nature of our relationship. You think you know someone, right? But sometimes, the real truth doesn't show itself until everything you've known, everything you've believed in, is shattered. It was an ordinary day, or at least, it started like one. I remember that morning clearly, like it happened just yesterday. I had woken up early, made myself a cup of coffee, and was ready to start my day. Olive and I had plans to go out for lunch later. Nothing unusual, nothing to hint that in just a few hours, my life would change forever. I wasn't prepared for it. I don't think anyone ever is. It happened so quickly, I didn't even know what was happening at first. I had just stepped out of the house, walking down the familiar path in front of our building. I remember the sun was bright, the air was warm. I had a sense of normalcy, the kind of day you don't think will be your last. The kind of day when the world still feels right. But then, it was like the ground disappeared beneath me. I don't remember much of the actual moment. I don't even remember the sound, just the feeling. The feeling of falling. I never saw it coming. 1 second, I was walking, and the next, the world was spinning. I lost my balance, stumbled, and then everything went black. I fell into the street. It was a car accident. A hit and run, to be exact. The car didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed, surrounded by white walls. Everything was a blur. The nurses, the doctors, everything felt distant. But the one thing I did know, the one thing I could focus on, was the overwhelming sense of fear. Fear that I wasn't just injured. I was never going to see again. When I woke up, Olive was there, right beside me. She was holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. She said it so many times, over and over, like it would magically make everything better. But deep down, I could feel it, the silence of her words wasn't just comforting. It was suffocating. I was scared. I didn't know how to feel, didn't know what to think, and most of all, I didn't know what was going to happen to me next. Olive tried to be my rock, just like she said she would. She insisted on taking care of everything, making all the decisions, handling the medical bills, setting up appointments, managing my life in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. She became indispensable. I needed her in ways I never had before. And she was there, always there, like I was the center of her universe. But the more I relied on her, the more I realized she was controlling the narrative of my life. I couldn't see it at first. I didn't have the luxury of seeing what was happening right in front of me. I was dependent on her, and that made me vulnerable. I had no choice but to trust her. The hospital visits became routine, the physical therapy sessions endless. And through it all, Olive was by my side. At least, that's what I thought. But as the days passed, I started to feel something was off. It wasn't the physical pain that bothered me. It wasn't even the overwhelming frustration of not being able to see anymore. No, it was the way Olive started treating me. She would make little comments here and there, always wrapped in kindness, but with a hint of something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. She'd say things like, you wouldn't be able to handle any of this without me. Or, if you didn't have me, you'd probably lose your mind. I thought it was just her way of being supportive. Maybe she was right, I was lost. But the more I heard her say things like that, the more it started to wear on me. I began to question whether she really cared for me, or if I was just a project. Something she could fix, something she could control. And it didn't stop there. She started making decisions for me in ways I didn't expect. After the accident, Olive insisted on taking over everything. She chose what I ate, how I spent my days, who I interacted with. She'd tell me who I should call and when. She managed my schedule like it was her own. I couldn't argue, I couldn't even see what was happening. I was so dependent on her that I didn't realize the extent of it until I started hearing things from other people. Friends who had been around before the accident started to notice changes in Olive. They said she wasn't the same, that she was acting like I couldn't function without her. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that Olive, the person who had promised to always be there for me, was becoming someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't just that she was taking control of everything. It was that she was subtly erasing my ability to make decisions. Slowly, I started losing confidence in myself. I was becoming afraid to do things on my own. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about power. Olive wasn't just helping me recover, she was ensuring that I needed her. And in doing so, she was taking away what little independence I had left. I don't know when it happened, but at some point, I lost myself. I went from being a man who was independent, capable, and in control of his life to someone who couldn't make the simplest decisions without Olive's approval. And as the days passed, I realized that I was no longer in a relationship built on love. I was in a relationship built on dependence. And as I lay there, in that hospital bed, unable to see, I began to understand what was happening to me. It wasn't just my vision that was taken away. It was my freedom. That's when I started to question everything. What kind of life was I living? What kind of relationship had I been in? Was Olive really the person I thought she was? Or had I been blind to something much worse for too long? That's the question that kept me up at night. You see, when you lose your sight, you lose more than just the ability to see. You lose a part of yourself, a part of your independence, a part of your autonomy. And once you lose that, it's so easy to stop questioning the people around you, especially the ones who seem to be there for you the most. But it wasn't just the blindness. No, it was something else, something I couldn't see at all. I started to notice the little things, at first. At first, it seemed innocent, just a few odd comments, a change in the way Olive spoke to me. She had always been a little assertive, a little dominant, but I never thought much of it. I mean, that's just how some people are, right? She was strong, independent, and I admired that. But now, as I started relying on her more and more, I began to realize there was a pattern. A pattern I had ignored. It wasn't just about what she said, it was about how she said it. And how I felt when she said it. For example, when we went to visit my family a few weeks after the accident, Olive started making decisions for me without asking. She would tell me what to say, how to respond, even what to wear. I was always too embarrassed to argue. After all, I couldn't see myself, could I? So, I let her do it. But the more she did it, the more I started feeling like I was losing control over my own life. And it wasn't just about the physical things, either. It was the emotional manipulation that started creeping in. There were moments when she'd tell me I was weak for needing help. She'd make comments like, "You're lucky I'm still here. You wouldn't survive without me." Or, "If I didn't take care of everything, you'd probably just fall apart." I should have recognized it for what it was. I should have seen the way she was slowly undermining my confidence, my sense of self-worth. But I didn't. I thought I needed her. I thought I was lucky to have her around. I thought she was just being protective, and I believed it. But as the weeks went by, it became harder to ignore. Olive wasn't just taking care of me, she was dictating my every move. She started choosing my friends for me, telling me who was good for me and who wasn't. I'd ask about hanging out with my old friends, and she'd say things like, "You don't need them anymore. They'll just bring you down." Or, "You don't need to talk to him, he's not really looking out for you." At first, I thought she was just looking out for me. Maybe she saw things I didn't. But the more she isolated me from the people I cared about, the more I began to wonder if she was trying to make sure I had no one left but her. No one to question her, no one to notice what was really happening. No one to see the way she was changing me. She even started to control what I ate. She would choose my meals for me, telling me that certain foods weren't good for my health, when I didn't even know what I was eating half the time. I couldn't see, and she knew that. So, she started telling me what I could and couldn't have, what was good for me, what wasn't. At first, I thought she was just being a caring partner. She was looking out for my health. But in hindsight, I see it now for what it was: control. She was controlling everything, down to the smallest detail, and I was too weak to stop her. I couldn't see through it. One day, she even went so far as to tell me I shouldn't see a therapist anymore. "You don't need therapy," she said. "You have me." And for a while, I thought she was right. Why would I need a therapist when I had Olive? She seemed to have all the answers, to know exactly what I needed. She convinced me that talking to a professional would only make me worse. That I was the problem, not her. That I just needed to trust her more, lean on her more. It didn't occur to me that this wasn't care, this was control. And the more I let her, the more I found myself isolated, alone in a world where Olive was the only one who mattered. She had become the center of my existence. The one person I depended on, the one person I trusted, the one person who shaped my reality. I didn't realize that I had stopped being me. I had stopped thinking for myself. I had stopped making my own decisions. I was losing who I was, and it was happening so slowly that I didn't even notice. I was so afraid. Afraid of what would happen if I didn't follow her lead. Afraid of what would happen if I questioned her, or worse, if I left. And so, I stayed. I stayed because I thought I had no other choice. She made me feel like I couldn't survive without her, like my world would crumble if I didn't have her guidance. The truth is, I was too scared to see the truth. Too scared to admit that the woman I loved, the woman I thought was helping me, was the very one keeping me in chains. It wasn't just manipulation, it was gaslighting. Olive wasn't just making me dependent, she was making me doubt myself. She was making me feel like I couldn't trust my own instincts, my own judgment. She'd twist things around until I thought I was the problem, until I felt like I was the one who was broken. And the scariest part? It worked. For a long time, it worked. I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't trust anyone else. I thought it was all me. I thought it was my fault. But something inside me started to shift. The more I questioned Olive's actions, the more I began to see the cracks in her facade. It wasn't just her controlling my life, it was the way she made me feel about myself, about my worth, about my place in the world. And it took everything I had to finally admit it, but I had to face the truth. I was losing myself in her game, and I didn't know how to escape. And that's when I realized something I wish I had seen much earlier. Olive wasn't here to help me. She wasn't here to love me. She was here to make me hers. Completely. She wasn't a partner in a relationship. She was a warden, and I was her prisoner. Looking back, I can see the signs now. The subtle manipulation. The control. The isolation. The way she broke me down piece by piece, until I was nothing more than a shadow of myself. But I couldn't see it back then. I was too blinded by my fear, by my dependence on her. And that was the beginning of the end. The moment I started to wake up to what was really happening, but I had no idea how deep it went. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could confront Olive, ask her, talk about it. But I wasn't prepared for the truth. No one can ever be prepared for something like this. You know, people always say that love blinds you. But I never realized how true that was until I couldn't see. Until I started questioning everything, everyone, including Olive. I should have known. I should have noticed, but I kept telling myself, she's here for me. She's all I have now. But that's where I made my mistake. I let her make me believe that. I let her convince me that I couldn't live without her, that I didn't deserve anyone else in my life. She became my world, and in doing so, she had complete control over me. I didn't question her because I trusted her. I thought that trust was love. But I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding little things, little pieces of the puzzle, but I didn't know how they fit together. At first, it was just odd behaviors, strange comments, moments when Olive would act distant or irritated for no reason. I thought it was stress. I thought maybe the pressure of taking care of me, managing everything, was starting to wear on her. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe she was just overwhelmed. But then one day, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was sitting in the living room, alone for once, which was rare. Olive was out running errands, and I decided to go through some of the old boxes in the attic. It was a strange urge, I know, but I thought I might find some old photos or letters. Something to remind me of who I was before everything changed. That was when I found it. I went through a few boxes, mostly full of old knickknacks, clothes, and books. But then, under some old papers, I found a folder. A thick, yellowed envelope. At first, I thought it was just some old bills or documents I didn't recognize. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't anything like that. It was a series of letters. Letters from Olive. Only they weren't to me. The letters, they were addressed to someone else. And it wasn't just a few. There were pages upon pages. As I flipped through them, my heart started to race. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The letters were love letters. They were filled with affection, deep, emotional language, everything you'd expect from someone in the throes of an affair. I couldn't process it at first. I kept telling myself it wasn't possible. But the handwriting was hers. The words, her words. And they were not for me. They were for someone else. It didn't stop there. As I kept reading, I found more disturbing details. Plans. Dates. Even some pictures of Olive and this man, together. In places I had never been. At events I hadn't attended. It was all there, right in front of me. Olive had been seeing someone else. While I was lying in a hospital bed, while I was struggling to adjust to my new reality, Olive was living a double life. And I was the fool. I had believed every word she told me. I had trusted her with everything. And she betrayed me. The betrayal stung in ways I can't even describe. I felt worthless. I felt like I had been living in a lie. I thought I had found someone who loved me, someone who would stand by me through everything. And she had been with him the entire time. She was out there, pretending to be my savior, my caretaker, while behind my back, she was planning a life with someone else. How could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen it? I wanted to confront her. I wanted to throw those letters in her face, to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But something held me back. It was like I was scared to face the reality. Because facing it meant I would have to admit to myself that I had been manipulated, deceived. And I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know who I was anymore. How could I? When I couldn't trust the one person I thought I could rely on. I didn't want to lose her. But deep down, I knew I already had. She had already chosen someone else. And that's when the realization hit me with full force: Olive wasn't just a liar. She was a manipulator. A master at weaving webs of deceit, making sure I would never question her actions, that I would always be too dependent to leave. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had a plan, and I was just a pawn in it. I started asking myself, how much of what I thought was real, was just part of her game? How much of my dependence was really just her ensuring that I stayed in the dark? How long had she been playing me? How much of our entire relationship was just a lie? Olive had made me feel like I couldn't survive without her. She had made me believe that she was my protector. That she was the one who kept me grounded. But the truth? The truth was that she was never protecting me. She was suffocating me. And all the while, I was too blind, too weak, to see it. I had given her control, I had trusted her with everything, and all she had done was betray me. She wasn't just my partner. She was the reason I was losing myself. Now, I had to decide what to do with all of this. The letters, the pictures, the undeniable truth, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend anymore. Olive had been lying to me, and I had been living a fantasy. The question wasn't if I would confront her, it was when. And when that moment came, I knew it wouldn't just be a confrontation about an affair. It would be the beginning of me reclaiming my life. My independence. My truth. Because I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her define me anymore. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this trap. But I knew one thing for sure: the betrayal that Olive had inflicted on me wasn't going to be the end of my story. It was the turning point. And it was time for me to take control back. Whatever it took. I wasn't going to let Olive continue to manipulate me, to control my life. I had given her the power for too long, and it had cost me everything. Now, it was my turn. I wasn't just going to let her walk away unscathed. No, she needed to face the consequences of what she had done. I remember sitting there, in that same room where I had first discovered the letters, and feeling a cold sense of clarity wash over me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was done. I had spent so much time justifying Olive's actions, making excuses for her, but now, I saw things clearly. I saw her for what she really was. And I knew that I couldn't let this betrayal slide. I had to take action. I had to take back control over my own life, and if that meant revenge, then so be it. I didn't know exactly how I would do it, but I started planning. Revenge doesn't have to be some grand spectacle. It doesn't need to be dramatic, but it does need to be effective. And I had learned enough about Olive in the time we'd been together to know her weaknesses, her fears, her insecurities. I knew where to hit where it would hurt the most. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the most powerful revenge wasn't about humiliating her or making her regret what she had done, it was about taking everything she had worked so hard to control away from her. It was about making her see that she couldn't just get away with it. I needed to think this through carefully. I couldn't afford to let my emotions cloud my judgment. So, I started small. I began to document everything: the letters, the photos, the phone records I had secretly saved over the months, all the evidence that proved Olive's affair. But I knew that wasn't enough. Just exposing her would be too easy. She would just deny everything, accuse me of being paranoid, of misunderstanding her. No, I needed something more. I needed to ensure that she couldn't wriggle her way out of this. I needed leverage. And leverage, I knew, would come from one simple thing: control. Olive thought she had complete control over me. She thought I was too weak, too dependent, too damaged to do anything about what she had done. She underestimated me. And I was going to show her just how wrong she was. I spent the next few days thinking about my options. How could I make her pay? How could I turn this situation around in my favor? It was then that I realized, she had been isolating me from everyone, making sure I had no one to turn to, no one to rely on but her. She had tried to make me dependent on her for everything. But now, I had a network, a lifeline of people who were waiting for me to reach out to them. Old friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Family members who had been pushed aside. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Olive had made a critical mistake. She had underestimated the power of those connections. She thought she had cut me off from everyone important in my life, but she hadn't. She had just made me realize who truly cared for me. And now, they were going to help me. They were going to be my eyes, my support, and together, we would make sure Olive couldn't get away with this. I started to reconnect with people. It wasn't easy at first. I had to explain what had happened, what I had been going through. But slowly, I started to rebuild the bridges Olive had burned. I made sure to gather allies, people who would stand by me when the time came. I began reaching out to the people Olive had tried to keep me away from, bringing them back into my life one by one. I knew I couldn't take her on alone. But with the right support, I was stronger than she ever realized. And as I began to rebuild my support system, I knew it was time to gather the final piece: the truth. I had the evidence of Olive's affair, but I needed something more. I needed to expose her for the person she truly was. I needed to show everyone the manipulation, the deceit, the way she had been controlling me. I knew that she had been hiding things. She had been lying to everyone, not just me, but to our friends, to our families. I needed to dig deeper. I needed to find those cracks in her perfect facade and shatter them. I began to watch Olive more closely. It wasn't hard, she had become complacent in her manipulation. She thought she had won. She thought she had me right where she wanted me. But the more I watched her, the more I saw the little things she didn't notice. The way she would slip up when talking to others. The nervous laugh. The hesitation in her voice when she answered a simple question. I started to document everything, paying attention to the details. I knew that, sooner or later, she would make a mistake. And when she did, I'd be ready. Every move I made was calculated. Every decision was planned. I wasn't going to rush into this. I wasn't going to let my emotions dictate my actions. I had spent too long being controlled by Olive. Now, I was the one in control. And I was going to take my time, gather my resources, and make sure that when I finally confronted her, she would have no escape. No way to deny what she had done. No way to twist the narrative in her favor. She would have to face the truth, and face the consequences. Revenge doesn't mean revenge on your terms. It's about taking back everything they stole from you, your dignity, your peace of mind, your power. And it's about doing it in a way that leaves no room for doubt. Olive thought she could break me. She thought she could control me. But I was about to show her that the person she thought she had manipulated had learned a few things along the way. And when it came down to it, she was going to regret ever thinking she could get away with this. I didn't know how long it would take, or what would happen when I confronted her, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never be the same again. I had changed. And I wasn't going to let Olive destroy me. Not anymore. I had spent enough time being her pawn, her tool to manipulate. I had been broken, betrayed, made to feel small and insignificant, but now, I was standing tall again. And the time had come for her to face the consequences of what she'd done. No more hiding. No more lies. I wasn't going to let her spin her web around me anymore. I had everything in place. The letters. The evidence. The witnesses. I knew what I needed to do, and I knew that I had to be strategic. Olive was smart. She was calculated. But I wasn't the person she thought I was anymore. I was prepared for this. I was ready to take her down. The plan was simple, but I wasn't going to rush it. I wanted her to think everything was fine, that I had forgotten, that I was still weak. I had learned that Olive thrived on control, on making me feel like she was the one who had all the power. So I had to give her that illusion. I had to let her think that she could still manipulate me. But I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. No. I was setting the stage for a confrontation that would force her to face everything she had done. I called Olive that afternoon, after everything was in place. I told her that I wanted to meet. That we needed to talk. I could hear the tension in her voice, the hesitation. She probably thought I was finally ready to forgive her, to let everything slide. She didn't know I had already seen through her lies. And when she agreed to meet, I felt a chill run through me. I knew this was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment I would finally confront her, not as the broken man she thought I was, but as the person I had become, the person she could no longer control. I met her at the same cafe we had first gone to when we started dating. A place that used to be full of happy memories. I knew she would feel safe there, comfortable, like it was still our spot. And that was exactly what I wanted. I needed her to be in her element. I needed her to feel like nothing was out of the ordinary, just a simple conversation between us. But she had no idea that everything was about to change. Olive sat down across from me, a little too relaxed. She smiled, like she always did when she thought she had one. She tried to ask me how things were going, if I was adjusting better to everything. I could see the fake concern in her eyes, the way she played the role of the loving wife. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Not even for a second. I didn't waste time. I slid the folder across the table to her, those letters, the photos, the phone records. I watched her face as she realized what was happening. Her eyes went wide, the smile faltering, the carefully crafted facade crumbling away. She picked up the folder, but she didn't immediately open it. She hesitated. And that's when I knew. I knew she was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make it my fault, how to twist the narrative. But she wasn't going to get away with it. You don't get to do what she did to me, and then just walk away like nothing happened. You don't get to destroy someone's trust, to lie to their face, to play them for a fool, and then pretend it was all just a mistake. So I said it, flat out. I know about him. I know about your affair. I know everything. And I watched her face, waiting for the denial. I knew she would try to play it off, to make excuses, but I was ready. I wasn't going to back down. She froze. Her hand trembled as she held the folder. For a moment, she didn't say anything. And I could see the gears turning in her mind. The wheels of manipulation that had always been there, trying to figure out how to save herself. But the truth was in front of her. She couldn't deny it. She couldn't twist it. It was all there, the evidence, the lies, the betrayal. I didn't need her confession, I had everything I needed to expose her. And that's when I saw it. The mask slipped. The caring wife, the loving partner. Gone. Replaced by someone who was scared. Scared of losing everything she thought she had controlled. And in that moment, I realized that her greatest fear wasn't that I would leave her. It was that I would expose her for what she truly was. She tried to apologize. She said it wasn't what it seemed, that I was misinterpreting everything. She said I didn't understand. She even tried to make me feel guilty for going through her things, for invading her privacy. But I didn't let her. I wouldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her twist it. You've already destroyed everything, Olive, I told her. You've destroyed us. You've destroyed me. And now you have to face the consequences. The words stung her. I saw it in her eyes, that flicker of realization that she had no way out. She was trapped, exposed. She couldn't lie her way out of this. She couldn't make it all disappear. And that's when I dropped the bombshell, I'm going to tell everyone. Your family, your friends, everyone. I'm not going to be the one to protect you anymore. You've made your bed, and now you'll have to lie in it. I didn't say another word after that. I got up, and I walked away. I didn't need her to say anything else. The damage had been done. The power had shifted. And as I left that cafe, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. Not just for me, but for the truth. I had taken back control. And Olive? She was left to deal with the fallout of her own actions. As I walked away, part of me expected some dramatic outburst, some emotional plea for forgiveness, but there was nothing. Just silence. And I realized then that maybe, just maybe, I had already won. Not because of the revenge itself, but because I had finally taken control of my own life. I had faced the truth, and I wasn't afraid anymore. So, was justice served? In a way, yes. Olive had to face the truth, and I had to face my own strength. But revenge doesn't bring back what was lost. It doesn't heal the scars. What it does is give you back your power. And that, I think, is the most important thing. I didn't get the satisfaction I thought I would. No, not really. The moment Olive's mask slipped and I saw the fear in her eyes, it didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It was something else. It was relief, yes. But it was more than that. It was the moment I knew I was done. Done with her. Done with the lies. And done with letting her have power over me. But was I really done? Was the closure I was looking for there, or was I just fooling myself into thinking I could walk away completely healed? I kept telling myself I'd get over it. I kept telling myself that I had won, that the revenge I had taken was enough, that moving on was the answer. But the truth is, moving on doesn't come as easily as we think. I had confronted Olive, sure. But what about all the pieces that had been left broken in my life, the trust, the time I couldn't get back? The anger, the sadness, it didn't just disappear after one conversation. And as much as I tried to pretend otherwise, I realized something deep inside myself: revenge isn't the end. It's the beginning of another journey. After that day, after I walked away from that cafe, I thought it would be over. But no. It wasn't. The truth came out, yes. Olive couldn't hide anymore. But what did I do next? I asked myself that question more times than I care to admit. What happens after you've exacted your revenge? What happens when the person you thought you knew, the person you once loved, is finally exposed for who they are? The easy part is confronting them. The hard part? It's learning how to live with what you've done, and how to rebuild your life. Part of me expected some kind of closure after that confrontation. I thought I would feel a sense of finality, like I could finally close that chapter of my life and move on. But that's not how it works. It doesn't just go away because you've confronted the person who hurt you. It's not as simple as turning a page and starting a new chapter. It doesn't just vanish because you've exacted your revenge. The truth is, there's a lot of emotional debris left in the wake of betrayal. And I had to deal with that. I had to learn how to live with the scars. Moving on, or moving forward? That's the question I had to ask myself. Because moving on is pretending it never happened. Moving on is ignoring the pain, the heartbreak, and just trying to forget. But moving forward? Moving forward means accepting the past for what it is, learning from it, and using it to shape who you are now. And that's what I had to do. I had to make the choice to move forward, even if I didn't know where that road would take me. Even if I was still unsure of what the future held, I knew one thing: I wasn't going to stay in the same place forever. I couldn't. Not after everything I had been through. The weeks after I confronted Olive were the hardest. There was no fanfare, no dramatic moments. Just the silence. The absence of her presence in my life was both comforting and unsettling. I spent time alone, sorting through everything, processing the hurt and betrayal. At first, it was difficult. I questioned myself a lot: did I do the right thing? Was revenge really the answer? But as the days passed, I started to realize something important. Revenge had never been about Olive. It had always been about me. About reclaiming my dignity. My power. I needed to show her, and myself, that I was more than what she had reduced me to. And in that sense, yes. I had done the right thing. But even as I reflected on everything, I knew that holding on to the past, holding on to that anger, wouldn't help me. It wasn't easy, but I had to make a conscious decision to let go of the bitterness. To move forward, not as someone who had been broken by betrayal, but as someone who had learned from it. Someone who had survived it. Because in the end, it wasn't just about taking revenge on Olive. It was about healing myself. Finding peace within myself. I had to forgive, not for her sake, but for mine. And that's the hardest part of all. Realizing that revenge isn't the answer. The real victory isn't in punishing someone who hurt you. It's in learning to let go of the anger and the hurt, and moving forward with your life. It's in finding the strength to rise above the betrayal, and not let it define who you are. Yes, I had confronted Olive. Yes, I had taken control back. But now, the challenge was learning how to live without her, without the bitterness, and without letting the past dictate my future. It wasn't easy. And it still isn't. There are days when the memories creep back in, when I question if I did the right thing, or wonder what could have been. But I know this: I am stronger than I was before. I am more aware of my worth, and I will never let anyone take that from me again. Olive, she's gone. She's no longer part of my life. And maybe that's for the best. I've learned to stand on my own, and I've learned to trust myself again. Moving forward means opening myself up to new possibilities. New experiences. New relationships. But more than that, it means finding peace with who I am, no matter what has happened to me in the past. I don't need revenge to define me. I don't need Olive to define me. What defines me now is the strength I found within myself, the resilience to keep going, no matter what. And in the end, that's what matters most. Revenge, closure, moving on, none of these things are as simple as they seem. But when you're able to take control of your own life, when you finally see your worth and stop letting others dictate your path, that's when you realize the real victory isn't in the battle. It's in the journey. The journey of healing, of growing, of moving forward. If you're watching this, maybe you're going through something similar. Maybe you're hurt. Maybe you've been betrayed. I'm telling you right now, you can get through it. It might not feel like it now, but you're stronger than you think. Take control. Learn from the past, but don't let it define you. Move forward. You've got this. Thank you for being here with me on this journey. I hope my story has shown you that no matter what happens, you can always rise above. You don't have to let someone else's actions decide who you are. You are the author of your own story. And now, the next chapter is yours to write. Subscribe to Wild Love Story for more real stories and emotional journeys. Make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future episodes.